Friends, we will continue with what we were doing in section 147, wherein we were discussing about reasons to believe, and I already explained what is a reason to believe, what can constitute a reason to believe. Write down, that is, the following constitutes a reason to believe for invoking section 147, A later Supreme Court judgment, disallowing an expense, oblique taxing a receipt, B, retrospective amendment in the law, disallowing an expense, oblique taxing a receipt. Third, evidence in possession of the assessing officer that assessee has understated the income. Then fourth, evidence in possession of assessing officer, that the assessee has claimed excessive loss, oblique deduction, oblique allowance, oblique relief. Fifth, mistake apparent from record. So these are the 5 possible situations where there can be a reason for belief, because section 147, unless there is a reason to believe, 147 cannot be invoked. So in that context, we should have a clarity what can constitute a reason to believe. Already we have discussed the point that a mere gossip or a personal opinion being changed, those things cannot constitute a reason to believe is a point, friends. Then for making assessment or reassessment under section 147, A separate notice under section 148 is required to be issued for each assessment year whose income is to be assessed or reassessed under section 147. Already with a good example, we have discussed this particular point. That is, let us suppose notice is issued under section 148 to reassess the income of 2004 and 5. While the assessment is in the process, what happened, friends? That is, we found another income pertaining to 2003 and 4. So, in case if you wanted to include and tax that particular income by making a reassessment relating to 2003 and 4, again a separate notice requiring the assessee to file the income tax return for 2003 and 4 also need to be issued is a point. In case if the new income which they found is relating to the 2004 and 5, that is the same year for which already the assessment proceedings are in, the reassessment proceedings are in the process, they can very well include the same without giving any further notice. So, the important point is that for each assessment year where you wanted to reassess the income and include, separate notices are required. This concept of separate notice, why in the reassessment proceeding under section 147? Because unless that person files the return, you can't reassess the income. So, for that, for each separate year, a separate notice under section 148 is to be issued is a point. Then, friends, we have few other important aspects relating to the 147. That is, assessing officer is a duty bound to supply the assessee the reasons recorded by him for the issue of notice under section 148 after the assessee has filed the return of income. Try to understand what is this particular point. See, they sent a notice under section 148 asking us to file an income tax return to take up the case for reassessment under section 148. That is, then what should happen, friends? Necessarily the assessee has to file the return of income. After filing the return of income, he can very well ask the assessing officer to tell what made him to issue the notice. Which reason made him to believe that income has escaped the assessment. Of course, he will not be duty bound. Who is assessing officer is not duty bound to tell it before the assessee files the return of income, but after filing the return of income, he is a duty bound. In case if the assessee asks for it, he has to give it. See, another important aspect is like necessarily whether you inform to the assessee or not when you are issuing the notice, reasons which made you to initiate the reassessment proceeding must be recorded and kept in the file. Because other way around, what will happen? The assessee may go to a court of law stating this reassessment proceedings being invalid. In case if he is going to challenge it, then the court will ask the assessing officer to give the record. At that time, they will examine whether properly reasons are being recorded or not. So here the whole lot of issue is, first reasons for issuing the notice for reassessment must be recorded and kept in file. Then notice will be issued. Then if the SSC requires those reasons which are recorded, it is the duty of the assessing officer to give that particular reasons to the SSC. Without recording the reasons, in case if the notice under section 148 is issued, then such reassessment proceedings becomes invalid. Write down. Before assessing officer proceeds further with assessment, in pursuance of notice, under section 148, he shall give to the SSC, with the substance of reasons recorded by him, and supply him a certified copy of reasons. So, in a different way, in case if we want to look at the situation, if the SSC demands for the reasons recorded by the assessing officer, after filing the return of income only he can demand, and if the assessing officer does not supply those reasons, then he cannot proceed with the reassessment proceedings under section 147. So first reasons must be recorded, then notice must be issued, then return will be filed by the SSC, then he can ask for that particular reasons which are being recorded, then it is to be necessarily, it is a duty of the assessing officer to give a copy of the reasons recorded, then he should continue with the assessment procedure is a point, friends. Then let us suppose assessing officer is not giving those reasons, then SSC can very well challenge that proceedings by way of a writ petition, in which case the High Court will ask the assessing officer to give that particular record where he has written the reasons, and in case they found that reasons are not properly recorded, then they can make these proceedings invalid and they can quash the notice issued under section 148. Write down what is the recourse which is available to the SSC. That is, if reasons recorded by the assessing officer, for issue of notice, under section 148 are invalid, comma, then SSC can file, a writ petition, in High Court challenging the issue of notice, under section 148, if the court is satisfied, that there are no valid reasons, then the High Court shall quash the notice issued, under section 148. And as we slowly move, you will be finding out there is a time limit for issuing the notice. There is a time limit for issuing the notice. And in case if the notice is not issued within the time limit prescribed under section 149, then what will happen, friends? That is, these proceedings becomes invalid. So in that context, the discussion will be on what is more important. Is it the issue date or is it servicing of that particular notice? This really matters. So write down the notice under section 148. The notice under section 148 is valid if issued within the time limit prescribed, under section 149(1). For this purpose, what is important is issuing of the notice within the time limit. That is, service of notice under section 148 can take place after the time prescribed, under section 149(1). So now, what is the point that you learned? Let us suppose there is a time limit up to 4 years. We will discuss in detail what are the time limits. On the last day of that particular 4th year, they issued the notice. After the 4 years, on the first day, they serviced the notice. No problem. Because what is more relevant date? Relevant date is the issue date. Once it is being issued, even if the service happens subsequent to that particular time limit, very well that particular assessment can be taken up further. But if the issue of the notice itself happens after the time limit prescribed under 149, then the proceedings becomes void ab initio. Now we have to look at what are the time limits for issuing of a notice under section 148. In this context, friends, first try to understand there are two time limits. One is up to 4 years, second is up to 6 years. From the end of the relevant assessment year. Now the point of interest here is, why up to 4 years and why up to 6 years? Here, point that should go into your mind is, reassessment proceeding is also an extra effort by the department. In that context, ABC analysis. What is ABC analysis? You might have studied in costing also. That is, more detailed control is required on items of material which are having higher value compared to the items which are more in number but less in value. So the point here is, there is a monetary limit. There is a monetary limit stating that in case if the income escaping the assessment is more than this particular monetary limit, then you can take up that particular reassessment even after 4 years up to 6 years. And another important aspect that should go into your mind is, like, prior approval, sanction, is it required? Or assessing officer on his own, without taking anybody's approval, can he initiate the reassessment proceeding? How do we decide on this, friends? How do we decide on this? Is it your reassessment under section 147 is happening after once 143(3) regular assessment or 144 best judgment assessment happened, or in that particular case earlier no assessment happened? These are the two another important aspects. And where the sanction is required, that is also another important thing. So by now we are clear with one point, there are time limits for issuing the notice. and there is a requirement under some circumstances to take the prior approval of the higher ups, and there is a monetary limit which is fixed, and in case if you want to take up the case even after 4 years up to 6 years, unless you are able to establish income escaping the assessment is more than that particular monetary limit, you should not take up that particular case for reassessment after 4 years. Monetary limit is 1 lakh. बड़ा क्राइम है तो बड़ा छोटा कैसे डिस्टिंग्विश कर रहे हैं? ये सेक्शन के हिसाब से तो 1 लाख के अंदर है तो वो छोटा क्राइम है, 1 लाख से ज्यादा है तो वो बड़ा क्राइम है. तो अप टू 4 इयर्स सो के बाद में 5th ईयर में आप उठ गए तो कौन? डिपार्टमेंट वाले. There, unless you establish the income escaping the assessment happens to be more than 1 lakh, yes, you can very well initiate the reassessment proceeding. Before you write the time limit, friends, try to understand one more trickish issue. See, notice is issued for assessment or reassessment under section 148, and there is a time limit which is prescribed for issuing of such notice. But please do remember, SSC will be issued along with this 148 notice, 143 2 notice also. 143 2 notice also, and that 143 2 notice must be issued within how much time? 143 2 notice must be issued within 6 months from the end of the financial year in which the return is filed. Now naturally students should get a doubt, ये क्या चीज है साहब? 148 नोटिस दिए, असेसमेंट को 147 में लेने के लिए. अब ये 143(2) कहां से आ गए? 143(2) कहां से आ गए? That is, earlier when you study 143(2), what is that 143(2)? Notice will be issued under section 143(2) to take up the case under section 143, and in that particular notice the assessing officer will specify that you please come to the, what is it, our office either in person or through your authorized representative, and then produce before us these books of accounts and these documents for our verification. Isn't it or not? Now here also 148 में नोटिस देके एसएससी को क्या बताए हम? रिटर्न डालो बोल के बोले, उन्होंने रिटर्न डाल दिए. अब बाद में एज ए मैटर ऑफ असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर वी शुड कॉल दैट पर्टिकुलर एसएससी, requiring him to produce the books of accounts and all that. Naturally, for doing that you required to, what is it, issue a notice under section 143(2). But then this 143(2) notice can be issued up to what time? Within 6 months from the end of the financial year in which this particular return in pursuance of notice under section 148 is issued is a point. So 148 notice issue करे, उन्हों return डाले, that is not an end in it. Assessment procedure has to continue. That is, SC must come, produce the information. For asking the SSC to come and produce the information, और एक नोटिस 143(2) में देना पड़ेगा आफ्टर द एसएससी इन रेस्पॉन्स टू द नोटिस अंडर सेक्शन 148 फाइल्ड दैट पर्टिकुलर रिटर्न, उसके बाद ये 143(2) नोटिस चलेगा। गॉट द पॉइंट? दोनों मिला के नहीं भिजाना। 148 नोटिस इश्यू करो। In case if he is happily coming and filing the return, then to carry out that particular proceeding, for asking that particular SSC to come and produce the information, you issue this 143(2) notice, but this should be done within what time? Within 6 months from the end of the financial year in which the SSC is filing the return in pursuance of a notice under section 148. Please write down before you write the time limit. That is, it has been provided. It has been provided in law. It has been provided in law that for a return filed, in response to a notice, under section 148, comma, the notice under section 143(2), the notice under section 143(2) must be served within 6 months, from the end of the financial year, in which return was filed, Otherwise, assessment under section 147, shall be void. Then friends, we move to 149. There is 149(1), there is 149(2). What is the time limit for serving the notice under section 148? That time limit is only prescribed under section 149. 149 discusses about time limit within which notice under section 148 need to be served. 147 discusses about reassessment, 148 discusses about the notice, 149 discusses about the time limit for issuing the notice under section 148, and 150, yes, for furnishing the return of income, a notice must be issued. That notice is getting issued under section 148, and time limits for issuing that notice are prescribed under section 149. Got the point? Write down 149, then you will be very clear with it. Time limit for issuing of notice, time limit for issuing of notice under section 148 is given under 149. Now make side heading 149 subsection 1. 149 subsection 1. As per section 149(1), as per section 149(1), comma, notice under section 148, notice under section 148 can be issued up to 4 years, from the end of a relevant assessment year, from the end of relevant assessment year. Try to understand here, whatever may be the income escaping the assessment, that is, even if 1 rupee of the income escaping the assessment is there, you can very well issue a notice under section 148 and can take up the assessment under section 147. So write as a continuation, you write whatever may be the income, which has escaped the assessment, for a relevant assessment year, Second point in this, notice under section 148 can be issued even after 4 years, up to 6 years, from the end of the relevant assessment year, if the income which has escaped the assessment, for the relevant assessment year, amounts to or are likely to be, or is likely to amount to rupees 1 lakh or more, So you are clear with this point. What is it? You can't issue the notice under section 148 after the expiry of 6 years from the end of the relevant assessment year, whatever may be the income which has escaped the assessment. Of course, what is most important is learning the exceptions. Those exceptions we will take up one after the other, but before that, try to understand reassessment procedure is not a simple issue. Definitely एसएससी तो फील होता, क्या होता? फील होता. क्यों? क्योंकि उन्हों हैप्पीली स्लीपिंग on the pretext that his case already got subjected to 143(3) scrutiny assessment, नहीं तो the best judgment assessment under section 144. ये क्या चीज है? और एक बार उन्हों हमको रिटर्न डाल के रीअसेसमेंट करने के लिए नोटिस जारी किए. So what you learned, wherever there is a chance for the assessing officers to harass the assessees, there all it is clearly stated in the law, prior approval is required. ये प्रायर अप्रूवल का जरूरत कब नहीं पड़ता? इसके पहले कुछ भी असेसमेंट नहीं हुआ, अब पहली बार हो रहा 147 में. Earlier he filed the return, we gave the acknowledgement, time limit for issuing the notice under section 143(2) is over. Subsequently we found that there is an income escaping the assessment, so we issued a notice under section 148. तब इस सैंक्शन का जरूरत नहीं पड़ता. But earlier already the assessment got completed, then naturally we prefer this particular, what is it, sanction. इस sanctions के बारे में लिख लो. That is, who said you have to take the sanctions? 149(2) says. एंड सैंक्शंस कब कब लेना बोल के किस सेक्शन बताए? सेक्शन 151 बताए. 149(2), राइट डाउन 149(2). 149(2) provides that provisions of section 149(1), provisions of section 149(1) regarding issue of notice, shall be subjected to the provisions of section 151. So 151 discusses about the sanction. Sanction means approval, prior approval. Make main heading section 151. Section 151. Sanction for issue of notice under section 148. Sanction for issue of notice under section 148. Now, try to understand. First, you put 3 columns. In the column number 1, type of assessment. In the column number 1, 3 columns. The column number 1, type of assessment. In the column number 2, notice up to 4 years from the end of relevant assessment year, and column number 3, notice after 4 years but below 6 years or up to 6 years, that is better, up to 6 years from the end of relevant assessment year. First, type of assessment is what earlier, right, that in the type of assessment where assessment has been made earlier, under section 143.3, under section 143.3 or under section 147. Like how many number of times you can revise your return बोले तो क्या पढ़े आप? N number of times. Like that only, how many times your case can be taken up for reassessment means N number of times. As long as they can prove every time there is a reason to believe that the income has escaped the assessment. If the earlier assessment happens to be 143.3 assessment or 147 assessment, तब क्या है दोस्तों? लिख लो, up to 4 years क्या होना? By the assessing officer, in the who can issue the notice up to 4 years, by an assessing officer not below the rank of AC oblique DC, Assistant Commissioner oblique Deputy Commissioner. Of course, if they are issuing, nobody's approval is required. But in case if an assessing officer below the rank of AC or DC is going to issue the notice, then prior approval of the Joint Commissioner is required. There, note. In case notice is going to be issued, if notice is going to be issued by an assessing officer, below the rank of Assistant Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner, then they require to take prior approval of a Joint Commissioner, prior approval of the Joint Commissioner. Then you shift to the next column. What is the next column, friends? Notice can be issued beyond 4 years but up to 6 years. There please do remember, in case if the notice is going to be issued by the what is it, assistant commissioner or a deputy commissioner, then what is it, they can issue. And in case if an officer is below their rank, then they have to take the permission of the joint commissioner. Of course, in case if the notice is going to be issued by the assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner, then they have to take the approval of whom? That is a chief commissioner or a commissioner of income tax. Write down there. That is, in which column you are going to write, friends? That is, notice can be issued after 4 years, but up to 6 years may likh lo. That is, if assessing officer below the rank of, if assessing officer below the rank of assistant commissioner oblique deputy commissioner issues the notice, then they require to take prior approval of joint commissioner, prior approval of joint commissioner. Then next point in that only, in case if notice is issued, in case if a notice is issued by an assistant commissioner oblique deputy commissioner, then they can do so, only with the prior approval of chief commissioner or commissioner of income tax. Commissioner of income tax. So by now we are clear with one point, friends. यदि अर्लियर असेसमेंट हो गए समझो अंडर 143(3) और 147, तब अप टू 4 years for any amount, even for 1 rupee, notice can be issued. If the issuing officer happens to be AC or DC, no approval, and if the issuing officer happens to be below AC or DC, prior approval of the joint commissioner. And in case the notice is going to be issued after that particular 4 years, but up to 6 years, if the officer issuing the notice happens to be the rank below the AC or DC, they take the prior approval of the joint commissioner. If the officer issuing the notice happens to be AC or DC, then they will take the prior approval of the chief commissioner or commissioner of income tax. So in any case, beyond 4 years, up to 6 years, irrespective of who is the officer who is issuing the notice, approval is must. From whom the approval is to be taken depends upon who is the person who is issuing the notice. But up to 4 years means prior approval is required only if the notice is going to be issued by the officer below the rank of AC and DC. They require to take the approval from the joint commissioner. This is the situation in case if the earlier assessment happens to be 143.3 assessment or 147 assessment. Let us suppose in the next situation, what is the next situation could be? Earlier assessment is not 143.3 assessment or 147 assessment. Earlier assessment happens to be no assessment or assessment best judgment assessment. If earlier assessment happens to be best judgment assessment or what is it? No assessment. In that situation, what is stated is no permission is required, no sanction is required, even if assessing officer below the rank of assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner is going to issue the notice. Up to 4 years, no, what is it, approval ka zarurat nahi. Beyond 4 years, up to 6 years bole to, definitely what should happen, friends? By assessing officer not below the rank of joint commissioner should issue the notice, and that too also with the prior approval of the, what is it, with the, that is any officer can issue, and in case if that particular officer happens to be the below the rank of the joint commissioner, they have to take the approval of the, what is it, the joint commissioner is the point. So write down. What is the type of assessment? Where the or other way around, other than type of the assessment में लिख लो, other than 143.3/147 means no assessment or best judgment assessment happened. No assessment or best judgment assessment. Then up to 4 years, any assessing officer without anybody's approval. Then beyond 4 years, column में लिख लो, that is by an AO, not below the rank of joint commissioner, and in case if the AO is below the rank of joint commissioner, in case if AO is below the rank of joint commissioner, then with the prior approval of joint commissioner. With the prior approval of joint commissioner.